revenge. The Kremlin accusing America of blackmail to get countries to kick out Russian diplomats over the poisoning of an ex-spy. But the White House says Moscow started all of this. We could get more from the State Department in a live event scheduled to begin at any moment. Also, the president and the porn star. Stormy Daniels goes after President Trump's personal lawyer with a brand new accusation. Plus, the census and politics. The Trump administration defending plans to add a question on citizenship to the U.S. Census. The Commerce Department insists that will help protect minorities. But the critics say they expect the opposite effect. An explanation and who's right? Let's get to it.
Breaking news. Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And first from the Fox News deck this Tuesday afternoon, the Russians accuse America of blackmailing other nations. A live look at the State Department now, where the spokeswoman Heather Nauert is expected to talk to reporters at any moment now. We'll listen once it starts and bring you major news. We're expecting the new Russian accusation to be a major topic. Moscow's stepping up threats of retaliation at this hour as the list of countries kicking out Russian diplomats grows by the hour. Just moments ago, the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders talked about what this means for the United States' relationship with the Russians.
The Russian government must understand that there are serious consequences for its destabilizing actions. This large and growing global response makes it clearer than ever that an improved relationship will only be possible if the Russian government changes its behavior.
The heads of 27 countries and NATO have now expelled at least 151 Russian officials. You can see the countries in red here on this map. They include the United States, Canada, Australia, and 24 European nations. The U.S. has expelled 60 diplomats, more than any other country. Actually, the process is underway now. Yesterday, officials at the State Department said the Russians have 1 week to pack their bags and get out. The Trump administration also ordered the closing of the Russian consulate in Seattle. Russia's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, told the Russian media today that his country is not going to tolerate what he called the obnoxiousness, and that there will be a response. He also accused the United States of influencing the other countries and claimed some of them are expelling diplomats only because of the enormous pressure, or as he called it, blackmail.
They are asking for one, then two diplomats while whispering apologies into our ears to leave this or that country. We know that this is the result of colossal pressure, colossal blackmail, which is now, unfortunately, the main tool of Washington on the international arena.
This decision to expel Russian diplomats is a response to the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter. That happened in England earlier this month. They are still in critical condition. The United Kingdom blames Russia for that attack, directly and explicitly. The White House has said the United States and its allies are here to send a message to Russia that actions have consequences. The U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis said today it is pretty obvious that Russia is behind the poisoning. He also said Russia used a weapon of mass destruction. President Trump himself has not admonished or criticized the Russians, and they have repeatedly denied any involvement. It's Fox Top Story, and Rich Edson's on it live at the State Department. Rich.
Shep, the number of Russians heading home is increasing now. Just adding to the list today, Australia, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, combined saying that they're getting rid of more than 10 Russian diplomats as this continues to expand. What you're hearing from the State Department and from the White House is that they've wanted an improved relationship with Russia. They've tried to work with Russia, in particular in the Trump administration, in certain situations around the world, but they say they cannot do much of that if Russia continues to be aggressive in these types of arenas. Take a listen.
I didn't say they had changed their behavior. I think that's why you're seeing the United States, along with over 25 other countries, step up and take action, and why we expect to see another of other countries follow our lead on that front.
The United States is still waiting for an official, specific response from the Russian government as to how they're going to retaliate. They've essentially said that they are going to retaliate. They're just figuring out how to do so. If you look at the instances in recent history, Russia, it basically mirrors what the United States has done in the past. If you go back to December of 2016, the U.S. kicks out 35 Russian diplomats in response to election interference. By that summer, Russia says you've got to have as many diplomats, the United States, in Russia as Russia has in the United United States. So that was a mirrored response there. You've also had some retaliation as far as sanctions is concerned on the U.S. side. So the U.S. is very much expecting that type of response from the Russian government, Shep.
A real challenge for whoever the next Secretary of State, right?
That's right, and he very well could be here right now. The president has selected CIA Director Mike Pompeo to follow Secretary of State Rex Tillerson here, and Pompeo arrived just about an hour ago. Those close to the situation say that he is here meeting with top State Department officials. They're talking about his confirmation hearing that's expected next month, and he's the one who's going to have to manage this relationship. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson tried to improve it, but you heard at the end of his tenure here at the State Department a much more aggressive tone towards Russia. Essentially, State Department officials said they'd grown tired of going over the same issues. One of those issues is Syria. The administration continues knocking Russia on that. In fact, earlier today at the UN Security Council, Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, voiced her frustration with the Russian government, particularly on Syria.
Cynical accusations of bad faith from Russia will not stop us from speaking out. And their blatantly false narratives will not keep us from telling the world about Russia's central role in bombing the Syrian people into submission.
The United States criticizes Russia for backing the Assad regime, for failing to push the Assad regime to enforce a ceasefire in that country. So a long list of gripes when it comes to the Syria relationship. But it goes beyond that. There is interference in eastern Ukraine. That has continued and been a point of contention between the administration and Russia. And then on top of that, there's election interference throughout the world, and including here in the United States, where the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson last month told us that Russia is already showing signs of trying to interfere in the midterm elections here in the U.S. this year. Shep?
Rich Edson, live for us at the State Department. There's breaking news now on Fox News Channel. The Dow Jones Industrial Average just moments ago crashed through the 24,000 mark. Though it has recovered only slightly, it's hovering in this area. Now you can see we're below 24,000. The Dow had been up hundreds today and is now off 214. The tech sector and retailers are leading this. Twitter, for instance, off 7%. Now off 11% and falling. Breaking news as we're speaking, and we'll have much more from our correspondents at the Fox Business Network coming up momentarily. The U.S. Census in 2020 will include a question about citizenship. That's the word from the Commerce Department. The White House is defending that decision today.
I think that it is going to determine the individuals in our country and provide information that allows us to comply with our own laws and with our own procedures.
Supporters say that will help the feds enforce a law that protects minority voters. The critics say this is something completely different, that it will actually make the census less accurate, because it will intimidate immigrants from responding. They say it's a political move, pure and simple, to give Republicans more power in the Congress. Expect a fight, and a big one on this matter, because the government uses the census to determine how many House seats each state gets and how to spend federal funds. New York's Attorney General says he's leading a group of 19 states opposing the citizenship question. And California is already suing the Trump administration over it. Anita Vogel is live in Los Angeles. What's the California Attorney General saying about this lawsuit, Anita?
Yeah, well, hi there, Shep. Number one, he insists it's illegal to ask a question about citizenship and that it will undermine the accuracy of the census, as you mentioned, particularly in California, which is home to millions of legal and illegal immigrants. Here's Javier Becerra from just the last hour.
We're here to say exactly that we don't take anyone in our state for granted, because they all work hard, they all make life better, and without each and every person who lives in our state, we would lose out on the things that we consider precious to our family and to our lives.
But legal experts point out the question of citizenship has been asked before in the census, and even though individual information is supposed to be kept confidential, at the end of the day, people answer what they choose to answer.
I don't think it's illegal to ask the question. It is illegal to give the impression that one is required to answer the question. So basically, when the census people come knocking, they're only entitled to force you to answer one thing. How many people live there?
And for anyone who is counting, this is now the 27th lawsuit the state of California has filed against the Trump administration, from issues ranging from DACA and the border wall to the environment. And now the census. Shep?
So we're hearing from those who are against this idea. What are you hearing from supporters of this question on the census?
Yeah, well, we know the goal of, we know the census is collected every 10 years, rather, and among other things, as you mentioned at the top, it's used to determine federal funding and the number of seats each state has in the House of Representatives. Well, this morning, the Department of Commerce put out a statement saying it's concerned about an accurate count of the voting age population and protecting minority rights, and that, quote, having citizenship data at the census block level will permit more effective enforcement of the VRA, the Voting Rights Act. But of course, Shep, critics say just the opposite will happen, that this will result in a chilling effect on immigrants with or without documentation, and that you might end up with a failed census result. Shep.
There really could be consequences if some states get undercounted.
Oh, well, that's right. Certainly some states could get undercounted, especially California, and that could threaten at least one of California's seats in the House because of the immigrant population here. And you can only imagine the political uproar over that. So stay tuned for more fireworks. Shep.
Anita Vogel in our Los Angeles News Hub. Thank you. The White House saying again that President Trump denies that he had sex with the adult film actress Stormy Daniels and that there is, quote, nothing else to add. Stormy Daniels is now suing President Trump's personal lawyer for defamation. The adult film actress, porn star, accusing attorney Michael Cohen of calling her a liar. This comes after she told Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes that she had sex with Mr. Trump before he was president. She also said a man once approached her in Las Vegas and warned her to stay silent on the matter or that something might happen to her. After the interview, Michael Cohen's lawyers sent a cease and desist letter to Stormy Daniels, accusing her of implying that attorney Cohen was the one who sent the man to intimidate her. Cohen has admitted that he did pay Daniels $130,000 to keep her quiet just days before the 2016 presidential election. But he and the White House say the president denies that he had sex with the then porn star. Trace Gallagher was with more from our LA News Hub. Trace?
Hey, Shep, the defamation claim against Michael Cohen goes back to a statement he made to the media in February where he acknowledged that he used his own funds to pay Stormy Daniels the $130,000. Cohen said the payment did not mean he was acknowledging that there was an affair, saying, and I'm quoting here, just because something isn't true doesn't mean it can't cause you harm or damage. I will always protect Mr. Trump. And even though that statement doesn't directly accuse Stormy Daniels of lying about the affair, the complaint alleges that Cohen defamed her by implying that she lied. Legal experts say the statement by Cohen is vague enough that it would be difficult to prove defamation. But this new complaint also amends Stormy Daniels' initial lawsuit against Trump. Now, remember, that's the suit she filed to break the non-disclosure agreement so she can tell her side of the story, which she already has. The amended complaint says the confidentiality agreement was illegal because Trump didn't sign it. And here's the White House responding to the various round of Stormy Daniels questions today. Watch.
When the president has addressed this, we've addressed it extensively. There's just nothing else to add. Just because you guys continue to ask the same question over and over and over again doesn't mean that we have to keep coming up with new things to say. We've addressed it extensively, and there's nothing new to add to this conversation.
The Stormy Daniels complaint also says the $130,000 payment by Michael Cohen amounts to an illegal campaign contribution, and the watchdog group Common Cause agrees. It's also interesting this new complaint has nothing at all in it about Michael Cohen threatening Stormy Daniels, which she kind of intimated on 60 Minutes. Shep.
Trace Gallagher live. Trace, thanks. We're watching closely the markets today, and they are decidedly red. The Dow has come down off the session highs more than 450 points today. What is causing this to have a real effect on your 401k? The Fox Business Network's experts are with us next from the Fox News Deck on this Tuesday afternoon. This is a heck of a thing here happening. The Dow was up a couple hundred points at one point today. So you see the green chart there at the top. It was just riding along. You know, we had the huge rally yesterday, a day after the markets posted the largest one-day rally in years. All of a sudden, like 40 minutes ago, 50 minutes ago, it just started Fox Business Network. Is this part of it?
I think it's absolutely part of it. You notice that Apple is a big loser on the Dow right now. You know, we moved 500 between the top and the bottom, 500 points today on the Dow. That's a very big move. Boeing, Goldman Sachs, Apple, 3M, those are the big companies that are moving right now.
Twitter down 11%.
Twitter's down 11%. And why? Because these social media companies, their entire business model was, hey, we get your private data, we sell it, we make a lot of money on that. And now that's being questioned. I don't know if you saw Cook County, suing Facebook, saying
that's Chicago.
That's Chicago, saying, hey, you guys aren't really a social media company. You're a data mining company. That's what you do for a living.
And now Zuckerberg says he's going to testify.
That's going to be super interesting. All eyes will be on that. You know, he so strangely said the other day when he was talking publicly about this, I don't know if I'm the right spokesperson for this. He's the founder of the company. He owns most of the shares. He's the CEO. Who better to talk about this?
Well, I understand why he wouldn't want to, but I understand why he's pretty well going to have to.
Right.
One other thing. Yeah. We're watching Twitter go down. We're watching tech stocks go down. We're watching Tesla go down 7%. And yet, General Electric is through the roof.
Okay, so this is rumor mill city. You know how this happens on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and elsewhere. People start talking, yammering. Warren Buffett is rumored to be interested in buying a piece of GE, a part of maybe all, I don't know. So I put out calls both to GE and to Warren Buffett, his office. Nobody's saying anything. In fact, GE said we don't comment on rumors. So I don't know if it's true, but it's something that people on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange today are talking about.
Ours is a robust and modern economy. Modern economies are normally service economies, which ours is. Consumer confidence is supremely important, and we got a new consumer confidence report today. What was it?
Not so good. Consumers are less confident than they were, and they just hit an 18-year high for confidence coming off of that. I don't know if you noticed this, but the Federal Reserve out with numbers on growing consumer debt, the highest in 11 years from the fourth quarter last year. I think people are starting maybe to hit their heads on the ceiling of what they can borrow and what they can do. That might be the case, but let me tell you, consumers drive this economy. 2/3 of spending. It's all about us and all about what we want to buy.
And if we don't want to buy, our economy is
a problem.
It's a problem. Jerry, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Also ahead, concerns over the retribution possibly from Russia. Moscow is now warning payback is coming after countries, including the United States, kicked out diplomats. So what could Putin be plotting? That and what it could take to repair the relationship with Russia. Repair it? That's next. Minutes past the hour now. Continuing coverage on our top story. Russia now threatening to retaliate after the United States and dozens of other countries kicked out Russian diplomats. The White House says that the move is payback. Payback for Moscow's poisoning of a former spy and his daughter in Great Britain. It also says the 60 Russian diplomats that the United States is expelling are actually Russian spies. Let's bring in Michael O'Hanlon, Senior Fellow at Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution. Hey, Michael.
Shepard, good to be with you.
If I'm sitting at home, I'm wondering, why did we let Russian spies in here in the first place?
Yeah, great question. Well, you know, they have other jobs too, and both sides play a game of sort of turning the other way. Some of the spying being tolerated. And when you say spying, you know, it's not like they're necessarily trying to sneak into our nuclear submarines down at Newport News or something. They're trying to develop a picture of how Washington works, who knows whom, that sort of thing. It's sort of old-fashioned gentlemanly spying, if you will, in many cases. And therefore, it's tolerated under most circumstances. But as you well know, and as your reporters have been observing based on past cases, when something goes awry, these can be the easy targets. In some sense, that should be reassuring that there's a path to recovery from this because, you know, why is there a legitimacy to having these people in our country in the first place? So it's sort of natural that we would do this, but then it's natural Russia would retaliate, and then you hope that that's the end of that cycle. But of course, we have a much bigger problem with Russia that this will do nothing to address by itself.
There's also this base in Seattle. It's not a base. It's a headquarters of sorts out in Seattle, a consulate. What's the significance of that? There's got to be something there.
Well, there could be a message, which is simply that we just saw you behave to use some of your, spies in a very, very violent way in England, killing or trying to kill a double agent of your own nationality. Therefore, you can't be trusted to have your people walking around our streets. Whether we've got sensitive individuals out in Seattle or not, whether there are Russians out there that Moscow might want to hurt or not. There could be simply a symbolism in saying, you're not going to be allowed to stay in our country as trustworthy individuals if we can now see that you're not trustworthy. So it could be something that simple, or there could be something more specific to Seattle that I'm not aware of.
If we really want to send a message to Moscow, to send a message to Vladimir Putin, how important would strong words, and just that, from the president be?
You know, I think President Trump struggles with this issue. There's a part of me that has to come to his defense in the sense that, and very few people do that of either party these days on this issue, but I think that he's right, that we can't let the U.S.-Russia relationship completely fall off the cliff. And if we can use harsh words from the White House spokesman or from the Secretary of Defense, but the president himself tries to maintain a certain rapport with Putin, that's not all bad in one sense. On the other hand, everyone can see with their own eyes that President Trump doesn't want to talk about what happened in the elections because the Russians were trying to help him. And he fears that will be interpreted as some manner of casting doubt on the legitimacy of his electoral victory. You know, I think that there's room for actually both realities. The Russians did try to help him, as our intelligence community has documented, but Trump also won. And both those facts, to my mind, are true. But President Trump hasn't wanted to accept both those, or has thought the one fact sort of runs against the other. So I think at some point he's going to have to be a little clearer himself. But the fact that he wants to be restrained in his rhetoric, I'm actually in favor of that.
We hear from various sources, Michael, this is as bad as relations with Russia have been in years and years, or decades and decades. Give us a little historical perspective here. Where are we really on this scale, if there is one?
That's a great question, Shep. I think we're as bad as things have been since, let's say, the early 1980s. As Gorbachev came to power in Russia, or in the Soviet Union at that time, he and Reagan, as you know, built up a pretty good rapport pretty quickly. And so by the mid-1980s, even though the Cold War was still ongoing, it was fairly hard to think of war between the United States and the Soviet Union. We still were helping the Afghan resistance fighters against the Soviet troops in Afghanistan. There were some other places where there were proxy battles going on, but things were gradually getting better. And certainly they did all through the 90s and the 2000s, more or less. And, you know, there were still tensions brewing, but there were no real prospects of direct military encounters with the two countries. So since 2014, I think things have been worse than at any time since the 70s and early 80s.
Michael O'Hanlon with context and perspective from Brookings. Great to see you again, friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Shepard.
Ahead, President Trump has been relatively quiet. He really has when it comes to the Stormy Daniels scandal and just about anything else over the last, 24, 48 hours. But other Republicans have to deal with it one way or another ahead of the midterm elections. So how do they do that? Well, that's coming up. And would you look at the Dow? It's lost another 100 points since last we brought it up, say 8-9 minutes ago. The Dow is on a downward slide. Updates throughout the hours. We approach the closing bell. Bottom of the hour headlines are next.
I'm Leah Gabriel with the Fox Report now. Hundreds in Atlanta, including 3 former presidents, honoring former governor and U.S. Senator Zell Miller at his funeral. He died Friday at age 86. His family revealed last year he had Parkinson's disease. The Democrat, known for his progressive work in education. He famously spoke at the 2004 Republican convention backing President George W. Bush. In 1992, he had done the same for Democrat Bill Clinton. Today, both returned the honor along with former President Jimmy Carter.
One of the most wonderful public servants we've ever seen in Georgia, and a good friend of mine for whom I'm deeply indebted, is Zell Miller.
His life is a testament to all that is good and all that is possible in this country we love.
I not only liked Zell Miller, I admired him.
Zell Miller will lie in state at the Georgia Capitol building until tomorrow's state funeral. We'll be right back.
Doing coverage of a dive on Wall Street. The Dow just moments ago was off another 100 points on the session, leaving the Dow down just about 1.65%. The tech sector is off really even more. I'm looking up the latest of the NASDAQ numbers, and that shows us that NASDAQ is down 228 points on the session, more than 3.1%, close to 3.2%. And of course, Facebook is one of those leading the charge. Facebook down more than 20% off its highs, down more than 5.5% on today's session, and everything, frankly, almost everything, is in the red. Let's go to the Fox Business Network's Deirdre Bolton. Deirdre, how do you assess this, especially with Facebook as the center?
Facebook is the center and facing a lot of pressure on that stock. Worth noting, one analyst comment cannot break down an entire stock trade, but Merrill Lynch is lowering the price target on Facebook for the second time in 5 days. But I do think, in fact, that this just shows the larger pressure on Facebook. Of course, we've been talking about the challenges that the company has ahead, and Facebook, we have to say, it is affecting trade for the rest of the tech sector. As we have seen all of these push and pull sessions, Shep, even going back to mid-February, right, where we saw that 2-week absolutely brutal sell-off. You had tech, which was always kind of a silver lining, and at least at pinpoint, sometimes it fell along with the rest of the market, but just fell less. But now with Facebook under fire, I think sentiment is certainly shifting for that stock, and it is shifting for tech overall. You were talking earlier about these entities and investigations that have come out or that are developing for Facebook, but there's even one extra one as of today. And in fact, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, by the way, is being sued by Illinois' Cook County, which of course encapsulates Chicago and the surrounding areas. But this is a very specific lawsuit. So it's sort of the first of its kind, saying that both of these companies, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, misused data that they scraped from social media profiles. And the suit says that both companies violated state fraud laws. So that's a pretty heavy charge. And if the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, does go to Capitol Hill and testify on April 10th, you can believe that he's going to have to field a lot of questions, not necessarily about that particular lawsuit, but that is going to be the spirit of the conversations with those congressional subcommittees. And of course, as you know, Facebook also now subject to its second FTC investigation since the year 2011. So if Facebook is found to have violated what it already agreed to as far as protecting our privacy back in 2011, you just got to keep adding on the millions of dollars of fines Facebook is going to have to pay. Shep.
Deirdre Bolton from the Fox Business Network, giving you the power to prosper. Thank you. Now, more on the White House saying again that President Trump denies that he had sex with Stormy Daniels. This is not to say the president has said that. He hasn't said much of anything. But the White House has said it. The press secretary, Sarah Sanders, referring other questions to the president's personal attorney. Let's turn to Jesse Burns now, associate editor for The Hill. Good to see you, Jesse.
You too, Shep.
They've kept him pretty well out of sight of cameras. Is that by design? Do we know?
Yeah, the White House saying today that it's responded extensively to the Stormy Daniels allegations from the 60 Minutes interview. Trump himself obviously has not publicly responded to these. It was kind of remarkable to see from the White House podium there Sanders saying that he doesn't always counterpunch when, of course, Trump is outspoken on everything, any kind of criticism, things that he disagrees with. Of course, he'll fire off a tweet or respond to it. He hasn't responded in person or directly to these Stormy Daniels allegations.
Are we expecting to hear anything from him on any subject, or what is the schedule?
Yeah, we don't have any indication that he will actually respond to it. We've seen now the last 2 days, 2 different White House spokespeople come out and essentially say that the president has denied this alleged affair, but of course the president himself not saying anything about it, and we don't have any indication yet that he will.
This matter of the census, the census was established way back in the day as an effort to count who's here, so they can figure out how to appropriate. Pretty simple thing. Of course, over the years, we've added different questions from time to time, sometimes for political reasons and sometimes for others. But in this case, the question is, are you a citizen? And the idea from those who are opposed to it is, if you require people to say whether you're a citizen or not, then a lot of people won't get counted at all. And that will be, on the surface, less fair. What's your reporting on this?
Yeah, well, I think that it's important to understand that if the Commerce Department were to go ahead with this in 2020 to require this question to be asked, it'd be breaking with 70 years of precedent under both Democratic and Republican administrations who have declined to include that question in the survey that's conducted every 10 years. And so while it has been included in smaller surveys for the census, it hasn't been included since 1950. And so I think that you are seeing some questions, primarily from Democrats in states across the country, who who are warning that it could impact the accuracy of this data, and overall it could impact the federal funding that's being sent not only to blue states but also red states that have major cities with hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants, and a lot of that federal funding being cut off because these populations are underrepresented, and therefore the administration thinks they don't need as much funding.
Jesse, some of the critics have said that this is part of a pattern, the gerrymandering on behalf of the ones who were in charge the last time you were able to draw, which was the Republicans, and now this effort to suppress the counting in a way that the critics would say there's been an effort to suppress the votes. What's the reporting on this? What's the nucleus of this?
Yeah, well, the administration has cited the 1965 Voting Rights Act and saying essentially if they include the citizenship question, they will be able to enforce this and be able to protect minority populations more. Of course, activists who have been involved in pushing for more representation for not only undocumented immigrants but other minority populations across the country say exactly the opposite, that this will impede that. And I think you're seeing, even last month, there were nearly 20 Democratic attorneys generals from across the country warning that if the administration did this, they would take some type of legal action. Now we're seeing that play out. And so, it's a question of, will this actually come about in 2020? We don't know yet. But I think a lot of the people that, advocate for those populations protected under the Voting Rights Act are opposed to this move.
It definitely gives them something to fight about. Jesse Burns from the Hill, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shep.
Several years ago, the governor of Arizona was all in on driverless car technology, opening up the roads to welcome the industry. Now he's ordered Uber to completely stop testing self-driving vehicles after a deadly crash. The question is that the right move? We'll update you on that. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average, again, down on the sessions we've been reporting throughout the hour. The NASDAQ off 3%. The S&P 500 off 1.8%. Continuing coverage as we wait for Neil Cavuto at the top of the hour after the closing bell.